Welcome back to Digging Deeper. I want to share some thoughts with you. We're going to switch things up a little bit. I'm going to share some thoughts from a recent research piece we did, and then I want to know what you think about it. And you're going to discuss it along with us as we do a Digging Deeper Live. So, what's that research? We wanted to know, what do drivers actually want? Now that sounds like a simple question, but it's not really a static one. It's more like asking, what does my wife want? You know, it's going to change. The answer changes every few years, and if you're still using last decade's answers, well, probably not right. We've been asking that same question since 2014, and if you look at the data over that, well, the answer's moving around a little bit. Is it all about pay? Well, yes and no. Is it all about home time? Kinda, but not exactly. How do drivers look for jobs? What makes them apply? What makes them walk away? The reality is, what drivers want ebbs and flows with the market, and it changes as new drivers enter the industry. So let's start with the thing everyone assumes it's all about: pay. Well, back in 2014 through about 2017, that assumption was mostly right. About 75% of drivers said low pay was the main reason fleets struggled to recruit or retain drivers. In other words, if a driver left one fleet for another, the explanation was pretty simple: the other guy paid more. And at the time, that made sense because the pay market was pretty fragmented. Only about 30% of drivers were earning between $50,000 and $75,000, and 25% were still in that $35,000 to $50,000 range. So switching companies could actually mean a real pay raise. But around 2018 to 2020, the story started getting messier. Pay was still the biggest factor, but drivers started talking more about home time, treatment, and schedule. In one 2020 survey, 27% of drivers said they would raise pay if they ran a fleet, but almost as many said they would fix operational things. 18% said guaranteed miles, 14 to 15% said restructure freight so drivers could get home more often. See, that's the moment when you see things start to shift. By 2021 through 23, pay was still the number one answer. 33% said more money would make them switch fleets, but right behind it were things like route choice at 21% and appreciation and team atmosphere at 19%. Drivers weren't just comparing pay anymore. They were comparing the entire experience of the job. And by 2024 and 2025, pay had basically become table stakes. Drivers still expect it, obviously, but it's no longer the thing that wins the argument. In 2025, 30.2% of fleets say pay is their biggest retention issue, while 29.2% say respect and treatment of drivers. Those numbers are basically tied. Part of the reason is the pay market compressed. Today, 85.2% of drivers earn more than $50,000 a year, so most offers start from a pretty similar baseline. Once that happens, a slightly bigger paycheck doesn't stand out the way it used to. You see the same shift with OTR work. About a decade ago, 57.9% of drivers reported doing over-the-road long haul, but even then, 31% said they would consider switching jobs for better routes and more home time. Fast forward to today, and OTR has dropped below 50% of drivers, as more regional and dedicated roles have become available. And then there's how drivers actually look for jobs now. 10 years ago, it was mostly word of mouth. Another driver would say, yeah, that company's all right. And that was basically the research process. Today, drivers behave more like consumers. When a job catches their attention, nearly 70% Google the company before they apply. They check reviews, talk to other drivers, and compare multiple fleets. So if you zoom out, the story from 2014 to 2025 looks like this. 10 years ago, drivers mostly compared pay. Today, pay is more like a starting line. 10 years ago, OTR was the default path. Today, more drivers expect regional or home weekly options. 10 years ago, drivers heard mostly about jobs through other drivers. Today, they research fleets like consumers. In other words, the job didn't change as much as how drivers evaluate it. And that answer keeps evolving. And that's what we want to talk about today. And I'm interested to hear what you think. How have drivers changed? And how have you adjusted? Live chat is open. Let's dig through the numbers together. I want to hear what you think about it. Let's get to it. Welcome to Digging Deeper. And we're back. All right, welcome everybody. live chat is open. We are trying it a little bit different in that we want to try something new. I need back up. Oh, the other way. All right, we tried something a little bit new today. I gave you guys kind of a preamble to the Constitution here. We gave a little preamble to what we want to talk about. Just basically, we did all this research to look at how drivers have shifted over the last 10 years. We threw out some ideas. I'm going to throw them to you. You guys really haven't seen a lot of it, so we're just going to have a conversation. But we want you guys to tell us what you think. So if we say something you don't agree with, feel free to let us know in the live chat. If you want us to expound on something, you have something to add, feel free to put it in the live chat. We will bring it up. We will look at it. We'll talk about it. Now, if you're a little shy because the chat is live and people will see, your name will be on it. If you're a little shy, feel free to use the Q&A instead. I'll still use it and bring it up. We also have some polls that will be running the entire time. Please participate them. I'll throw them on screen when we get to them. And then the other thing is the research we were referencing. There's a link that we're just going to keep up on screen the entire time. That thing that says get your copy of the research. If you click on that, you'll be able to download the research that we're referencing here. So let's start with the big first thing. We talked about what drivers cared about 10 years ago, what they care about now. We talked about it through the lens of pay. So I'm going to go ahead and put a poll up. But while I do that, let's see here. While I do that, you've been doing driver recruiting longer than all of us. You're old. 10 years ago, was that the truth? The data would say that, pay was the big lever to pull. Was that true 10 years ago? And audience, tell us if you think that was true 10 years ago.
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit, maybe a week or two ago. One of the things I think is 10 years ago, there was a larger gap in the different pay opportunities. And that has shrunk significantly. A lot of that, some of that was COVID, not all of it, but at one point, your OTR jobs obviously were more prevalent, which was mentioned on the video, but there was also just a larger pay for driving 3 weeks out at a time.
Right.
We've got some clients now where they have a bunch of different options and it's all based off of the shipper and the contract, but some of their out 3 weeks makes less or the same as a home weekly dedicated. So anyway, to answer your question, yes, pay was a much bigger factor back then.
Well, let's see what the audience says. Right now, we just ask. So we asked the question. They can't see it, so I'm going to read it to them. It says, is it all about pay when recruiting and retaining drivers? 7% say David is crazy. Pay is what matters. 35% say it's mostly about pay, but the other stuff matters a little. And then 57% say pay is just table stakes. The other stuff is where you win. Which one would you two fall into?
I fall into the third one for sure. I feel like that aligns with the data that we've seen. It aligns with the conversations that we've had with drivers. Nowadays, people don't view driving jobs, as just a means to an end. It's not just a paycheck. It's integrated with their life. And so it needs to fit their life. And so that work-life balance just matters so much more.
So you did a presentation a couple years back called Unveiling the Voice of Drivers. I think that's what it was called. And so you talked about this where you actually interviewed a driver that had been with the same fleet for a long time. And then can you kind of retell that? Because do you remember this? So you said, so
he did some research.
He did.
So if you remember, you said, you were like, what would make you change jobs? And you're like, well, more pay. And then you go, do you remember it from here?
Did I say how much more pay?
Well, you go, are you saying you haven't found higher pay in 10 years?
That's right.
And so retell that story.
And he said, David, you're going to have to not quote
really
me on this
put
one.
me on the spot.
He said something to the effect of, well, yeah, but my company is so good to me, it would take a lot more pay for me to leave.
Right, which kind of backs up this idea of like, pay is more table stakes. Could I go get, a little bit more somewhere? Maybe, but the other stuff matters so much that it's not worth chasing the check. Now, well,
you go ahead.
I just want to say so we got some feedback from the audience. I want to make sure they're being heard.
Amanda McGregor says, in your research, do you have any breakdowns between specialty carriers and general freight? Sorry, Amanda, we don't. I mean, the research really does go back. We've been running it since 2014. And back then we weren't breaking it down as much. Some of the newer stuff we break down a little bit more by driver type, but I will see what we can find. Maybe I can get you something.
We do have owner operator versus company driver, right?
We do have that. We do have owner operator versus company driver.
But auto haul specifically, I'm not sure. I know that's what she wants.
Yeah. Juanita says the numbers definitely fit what we are experiencing in our company with drivers, not just looking at pay, but home time, company culture, and recognition. And then Megan Lewis replied to that and said, 100% agree with this. Home time is a big topic for us. So it seems mostly, I would like to hear from like a dissenter a little bit.
I am.
Dissent.
Somewhat. I think, all the exit interviews say higher pay, majority. And I tend to believe there's a nuance, and I have joked about this before. If I go to a job interview, Randall Riley, and Scott Miller, early on tells me, I'm going to pay you an exorbitant amount of money.
Right.
But I am going to cuss you out in meetings in front of everyone.
Right.
Depends on what the number is. I'll be like, yeah, for that, I'll do it. Feel free. But for $60,000 a year,
right,
I'm out. I'm not doing that. So I do think there is, some of it is pay. If you're getting paid really well,
right,
then yeah, I'll work,
I also think there's a difference in if you're already looking for a job and you're deciding between two jobs, pay is a bigger deal. But if you're looking to leave a job, it's not often that you just say, I'm tired of making 60. I'm going to go look for 65. It's all the other things that make you say, I'm really unhappy with my job. Let me go see what I can find. And then you start seeing what other pay is out there.
So the way you phrased it when you did that presentation is she referenced, well, I probably shouldn't reference what she referenced. She referenced, remember the crazy hot matrix?
The video?
Yes.
Yeah. She referenced that, but it was about like the pay friction scale.
Sure.
It's like the more friction, it's like you said, if you're going to cuss me out in every meeting, that's fine as long as you pay enough. So it's that same idea of like, yeah, if you're paying enough, like there's a lot more that you can put up with. But like, that's the whole thing you said earlier is it's kind of stable. Like it's not as easy to go find more money as it used to be.
Here's what I wish we would hear more of.
Yeah.
And this is a little bit biased on our end because we're the advertising folks. But when we're working with clients and looking at inbound phone calls, and we can help recruiting teams. That is typically what comes up. One of the first things the driver says, "Hey, what am I going to make a week? What's my cents per mile? What's my annual pay?"
Right.
And I don't hear a good rebuttal from a lot of recruiters when they say, "I'm just going to make something up." Hey, you're going to average $1,500 a week. Then the driver says, $1,500. I'm making $1,700 now.
Yeah.
Okay. So that feels like it's a pay issue.
Yep.
To me, the next step is, well, then why are you calling?
Yeah.
If you're making $1,700, you're upset about something.
That's a good.
Where's
that's a
the
good
friction?
Point. Yeah, it's a very good point. I hope everyone heard that because that was an excellent point. I do want to get back to the chat just for a second.
Shut up, Aaron.
No, that was great. That was great. Juanita says hiring for local and regional are never an issue, but OTR is challenging, which she's perfect segue, Juanita. Thank you. Since we have both local and OTR, the drivers will take an OTR and quickly switch to local when it becomes available. And then Juanita said they want that home time. Julie says David is crazy, but that's not what the poll is asking.
Can we ask them questions or no?
Yeah.
I was just wondering what Juanita, didn't have to give specifics, but what does the gap look like in the OTR job versus local? I mean, is it 15, 20,000 a year difference in pay?
So Juanita, throw that in the chat. Tommy Malberg says most want max pay and max home time. Adam Sainer says everyone wants more pay, but expectations versus reality is what matters. And then Gary Blazinski says, what percentage does potential benefits at a job fit in with in this information? We have a great benefit package, which is one of our best recruiting discussions with candidates. Now, Gary, I would say we have additional research on which specific benefits matter the most. Mm-hmm. I don't want to get into it quickly, but if you follow up after, I'll send you that information. I do want to ask one final thing on pay real quick. So we talk about most people, we're kind of all over the place on what we believe here. Well, not all over the place. It seems most people settled in the pay is just table stakes. The other stuff is where you kind of separate yourself. If that is the case, if you believe that to be true, what does that mean for how you should advertise pay? Because we know also from the data that not listing pay in a clear way is very frustrating and hurts your performance on campaigns. So if pay is table stakes, how should you go about advertising it? I mean, it could be as simple as like how it's listed. Because I know you've talked about like.
I talk too much, so I'm just.
No, you're good. We want your. Remember, you've been doing this.
Go.
Yeah. So there's some nuance here too, and I will say, before I answer, I have had many clients, specifically from the COVID time, they saw truck utilization drop even when pay went up. So, hey, if I'm going to make 2,000 a week, I'll just drive 500 less miles. So there is an absolute diminishing return there on the pay side. So I do agree with that. But as far as advertising pay, we do this every day. So I don't want to come across like a know-it-all. And I do, when we talk to executive teams, a lot of your fleet executives, they're not in the trenches daily on what does the advertising say? What does it look like? So I don't expect them to know all that, but it is surprising to me if you take a step back, common sense. And if I am in the industry for 20 years and I am out actively looking for another job,
right?
If there isn't a whole lot of detail on what the job pays, what the requirements are, what the benefits are, it's super vague. PTO. Like everyone has PTO. And in the driver world, 53 cents a mile. Well, that's great. You just gave me half the equation.
Right.
Do I drive 100 miles a week? Do I drive 3,000 miles a week? So I'm just blown away on how many folks, they run their advertising, but they don't take a step back and think, if I'm trying to recruit a 5-year, 10-year veteran driver, no accidents, stable, hardworking individual, what is the message I'm portraying out there? Because a lot of it's vague and generalized, and you end up getting a lot of response from the newbies.
Yeah.
They're the ones that'll take any job.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Shifting over. Home time. So we talked about, so I'm going to actually throw something out because there was a stat, and I believe Josh, if you guys saw the recruiting roundup, Josh covered this more. Josh is over here. Josh covered this a little more in depth than I did in my little preamble. If you look at the stats, the effect of home time on applying, I like putting home time or great home time or wanting great home time in the ad is a bigger percentage than 10 years ago than it is now. But the reason is because the reason we think that is, if you look at the shift and you look at kind of the meta-analysis.
Don't do that again.
Meta-analysis. Is that the reason that percentage has like been less of an effect is just because more route choice. Like there's more regional, more local available. And so they're not necessarily looking for great home time. They're looking for better routes. And so like having route options, it's just like Juanita was saying, I think I'm going to ask you to remember something too. You told me about something about talking to people and you're saying you don't have like a pay or a job problem, you have a route problem. So is it the case, do we believe that it's home time is less appealing than route choice? Does that make sense? Or maybe you can correct that idea.
Home time being less appealing than route choice.
Yes. Because they just want the home every week. Like they just want to see local. They want to see regional. That's what they want to see. That's more appealing. I know you may not have the option. Like some people, that's just the nature of the job.
You don't have that to offer. Yeah, I agree.
But don't they kind of go hand in hand? Like the better routes tend to have better home times. So isn't it? How are we distinguishing?
So not always. You're right. I do think there's probably 75% of that is true. But there are some folks that say, I don't want to drive the 5 boroughs. I don't want to go in and out of New York. I don't want to go over the Rocky Mountains with chains.
Right.
That has nothing to do with home time. That's really like, I just hate that area.
Yeah.
There is some of that. But yeah, I think for the most part, it does go hand in hand. That I want to drive these 3 states in
Because
case
it
I need
gets
to
me
get
home
home
more.
quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tommy says, I agree. If the routes let them run through the house a couple of times a week, it is better for the drivers for sure. And then,
Only if they can take their trucks home.
yeah.
I
and
mean,
then-
that's something that we talk about a lot. Like that's a big perk.
Yeah,
Now,
Chris
I also-
Shover is what makes a better route. So you're kind of talking about that specifically. So there is the delineation between like the specifics of the route, but then there's just, I don't know, what do you call like a local, regional versus OTR? Do you call those different route choice, or would you call that just different? How do you specify that category?
When we set up tickets internally for a campaign, those are under the route drop
Okay.
down.
Yeah.
If that is,
But to put to your point, route type means 2 different things. It means,
Yeah.
are you driving locally, regionally,
Right.
OTR, or are you driving in the Northeast? Are you driving in cities
Yeah,
where
that's
there's
true.
a lot of traffic? Are you driving?
so there's some nuance there when we do advertising,
Mhm.
but clients will say, hey, we are dedicated by region,
Another
but
one,
not by
dedicated.
client, not by shipper. Still, there's all kinds of data that says dedicated is a highly attractive ad.
Yeah.
So both of them are valuable, dedicated by region or dedicated by account.
And to tie that thought back to the pay, dedicated pay, or sorry, guaranteed
Mhm,
pay. So kind of getting at that, people want the predictability. They want to know what they're going to make, know what they're going to be driving, where they're going to be, when
Yeah.
they're going to be home.
Mm-hmm.
That matters a lot.
Well, the chat says, or sorry, the last poll says, has recruiting for OTR positions become more difficult? 92% of the audience says yes, for sure. 7% says it's the same as always, and 0% said it's easier now.
Well, I mean, we have all kinds of insights on that too. Is that in any of the stuff that you guys published recently? The 2014, how many were driving OTR, like the raw number? I know you said some stat, but
It was.
it is just such a smaller pool.
Yeah, it's a smaller pool. Yeah, and one thing I wish I had done a little bit is look at the average length of haul. It may be in the actual research. I'm not sure.
I think
but
I've seen it.
I wish I had, because we've seen the average length of haul shortened
Mhm.
too. So, and it's like, I mean, if it's, I assume there are drivers out there that actually I actually knew a guy that was that way. Like drivers actually prefer, I want to be out there. Like I like being on the road, but I imagine increasingly over time that becomes more of the unicorn driver as more local and regional become available.
Well, I will say to that point, and some of the folks on this on the webinar may have multiple options. We had this conversation with a client yesterday that I like the question, asking the question in their advertising, what's more important to you?
Yeah.
And the drop down being home more often
Mhm.
or make more money. Now, to Adam's point, a lot of them will say, I want to be home and make more money.
Both.
It is not a multi-select drop down though.
Yeah, yes, I am.
Which one are you more interested in? And then we can talk about those best options.
Adam has another point in here. He says relay lanes are a possible solution, but a major change in the way we think operate has to occur. This would allow for good miles, not great, but the trade-off would be additional midweek home time.
Hey, listen, Adam, preach it, man, because I can't bring that up in an executive meeting.
Right.
The advertising guy telling the operations team to change the way they do their routes.
Yeah.
That doesn't go so well. They basically just tell me, go find me drivers, but that's 100% true.
And then Julie, our fearless SVP of marketing, brought us the stats and said length of haul was a record low of 500 miles. The average length of haul in 2025 was 500 miles, and that's down from 800 miles on average in 2005.
800 in 2005? Okay.
Mhm.
I was thinking it was somewhere around 700, but wow.
How much of that is like the introduction of Amazon and all these last mile types of services? Has that just changed what driving looks like in general? There's just so many more local options and last
I would
mile
think
options.
so. Aaron would probably know better, but I would imagine that had a big effect.
Yeah, I think I don't know the answer for sure, but I think when we talk about some of the campaigns we run for warehouse and mechanics, we just have seen distribution centers popping up everywhere, which
Right.
does shorten that length of haul.
Mhm.
And I think that goes hand in hand.
Tommy Malberg says, I find most say they want to make more money, but take more home time. So they say they want more money, but when push comes to shove, they take more home time and say, coach them on the priority is the challenge.
Well, it could be seasonal too, right? Or, season of life, that maybe that does fluctuate. I think that's probably true and fair. And I know we have a couple of clients that, which it's really tough. One is their biggest strength and one is their biggest weakness. We ask, hey, what's your biggest strength in the advertising world so we can help market to it? You can be at home as much as you want. You want to take a week off? You want to take 2 weeks off?
Mhm.
You can. What's their biggest weakness? They slip
Right.
seat their trucks. Hey, if your truck isn't moving, I'm going to have somebody else driving it.
Right. All right, let's shift over. In the research, we talk a little bit about technology, specifically like driver assist technology, dash cams versus outward facing cams and lane assist. Just for the sake of time, because we're already 30 minutes in, I don't want to get into that. I want to shift over to job search. I got a poll running right now for it. Job search. The basic idea that we talked about is back in 2014, you look and it was like people were using Google, but it was like, even from 2014 to 2017, which is kind of the segment that we've broken in, it was growing throughout that. But word of mouth, what's funny to me is word of mouth has stayed pretty consistent across all of it, is that even though they search online way more, it seems like they still talk to other drivers as much as always. Do you find that to be true as well?
It just means more when it's coming from someone you know personally,
Right.
and you can hear their personal experience and have a conversation. So you can search all day, but if you know someone that drives for carrier XYZ, then you're going to go ask them about their experience. And
Right.
that carries more weight.
Well, there's two things with that, I think. One is it doesn't, the fuel tanks on a truck are so large.
Yeah.
When you stop, you're stopping for a while.
Right.
You're trying to get a bunch done and then get back on the road. So they're talking there. They're all there. They obviously sleep in the truck stops. So you've got a ton of community. And then we should do something on CB radios. I'd like to know more about what's the CB radio like now compared to when I first started and ran around in 2005. But
Write that down, Zach.
I would assume it's much easier to, you pass by the Old Dominion truck and you ask him, hey, how you like driving for them?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm driving down the road and can just ask the guy next to me.
Yep.
You don't have that in many other industries, I guess.
So then if you look through the years, the big thing is like, obviously online, the way we asked it wasn't completely parallel throughout all that. But once again, the meta analysis would reveal that like, it's more like, yes, I use the internet, and then it breaks down more specifically over time to like, I use specific Glassdoor reviews. I'm looking at Google reviews. Online reviews seems to have grown a lot in how people research other fleets. What do you think? What do we recommend for fleets when it comes to like monitoring online reviews, dealing with bad reviews? What would you guys say is kind of what you would do in to monitor, and both like, how do you respond to that sort of stuff?
I mean, you talk to clients more than I do, Aaron, but in my opinion, you absolutely have to monitor them. And you have to just have a realistic relationship with reviews. You have to know there's going to be bad ones, but you also have to recognize that bad ones tend to carry more weight than good ones. It takes a lot more good reviews to outweigh a bad one. And so you can kind of combat the bad ones by responding to them and addressing concerns if your platform allows that.
Mm-hmm.
But to not ever look at your reviews and not be aware of what people are saying about you is not a healthy approach.
Yeah. And you can almost look at it like bad reviews are a bit of an opportunity. Like you can actually gain some points for your brand in the way that you deal with a negative review, because it's a very public format, and them seeing you kind of even owning up to a mistake and then dealing with it in the right way, that can go a long way. I think, and when that kind of stuff was first happening, the inclination was, well, how do I get these bad reviews off? How do I delete these things? Which is, I don't think, a good strategy. What do you think?
You guys just got back from vacation. We did
Mm-hmm.
too. Did you go out to dinner anywhere and use
Must be
reviews
nice.
beforehand?
No, I have a different story I can tell.
We do
but
all the time.
We don't.
You don't use the Google
Not
reviews
really.
or no?
Mm-mm.
All right. So what's your story?
Well, this was on a vacation years ago, and Delta broke my suitcase. And so when I picked it up, the wheels wouldn't work, and I still had to get through the Atlanta airport. So carrying a suitcase. And I'm not confrontational, but my husband is very confrontational. And he gets on Twitter and tweets at Delta and complains about them breaking my suitcase. And Delta responded publicly and said, send us an email. This is exactly who you need to talk to. We will send you a voucher to fully replace your suitcase, not just like 50% off, but a check to replace it. And that forever we've been like, Delta has great customer service, even though they broke my suitcase, but they fixed it in the right way.
I use reviews all the time. Drivers do too. I am, again, surprised. It's a full-time job though. Fleets should have people dedicated, and maybe it's their social media manager, to the reviews, to be able to answer them well, quickly.
Mhm.
Because I will say, when we look at restaurant reviews, and if somebody gave them 1 star, well, when you read the review and it's, we walked in 2 weeks ago and it was a 4-hour wait and there's no way we're waiting 4 hours and leave. I'm like, well, that's not a negative review. You were just
Right.
impatient. So there are some things in the reviews that if someone replies back and says,
Yeah.
hey, we'd love for you to come back. We want to pay for your meal. And I think it's extremely valuable. And most
Yeah.
fleets don't mess with it.
So let me ask you this, because if you guys,
I was just going to say, it's funny because I said I don't use reviews, but I do use word of mouth. I text every person I know who's been to where I've been, and I ask them, where did you eat? Did you like it? And I get recommendations.
You just don't
that
like
way.
random people's info.
I guess I just don't like random people's opinions.
Mhm.
so let me catch you up with the chat real quick. Tommy says that CB use has definitely dipped off with the use of social media and forums. And somebody says that's what they've seen as well. This is a very good point. People are more likely to post a negative review.
Yeah.
And then it asks the question. So either of you, how do fleets encourage positive reviews?
They incentivize, by the way.
Yeah.
Gift cards.
Laura says building a good culture is critical to receiving good reviews. And Julie says, if you ever feel bad about your reviews, go look at the 1-star reviews for the pyramids in Egypt. And Laura says, responding to negative reviews also shows the company culture. On building a good culture is critical. Amanda responds with, we have great referral programs that are highly successful, but those drivers referring are not completely online reviews. Their referrals are reviews in themselves, but those don't come up in online searches. So all very good points. Thank you guys for those. One thing I do want to ask, we talked about, this is all under the banner of like online search and how people use the internet to find and compare jobs. I do want to ask, how do you think that will shift over the next few years as far as how do drivers look for jobs online? How do we see that shifting?
I'm curious how AI is going to impact all of it. It's so much easier to compare multiple jobs through ChatGPT or Claude or something.
Right.
But then how much are people going to trust AI is another question. So I don't know. I'm very interested to see how that's going to shape things.
I do wonder if, like when search engines were first thing, of course, advertisers immediately rush into how can we get on board with that? And then one of the big reasons Google became really big is because they created the quality score that allowed even sponsored results and things like that to still be useful. So it didn't just
Had to be relevant.
Yeah, it's whoever paid. Right now, it looks like there's you can be an ad inside of a Gemini assisted search, but so far none of them have the true in chat feature of advertising. But I kind of agree with you guys that it will for sure shift towards AI.
Well,
and we are going to next in May, I think we're going to research. That's our next research project, is to see how drivers are using AI, how that's changing over time, sort of thing.
Even to Amanda's point, when it's driver referrals, I still think trucking lags behind in a lot of that. To take advantage of a driver on TikTok or Instagram, even some of the other platforms, and do a better job giving referrals using social media or those platforms.
Yeah.
That sounds silly because we're probably, I think, again, trucking's behind 3, 4, 5 years. So that has not crested yet. And I think they could do a better job there. Really good referrals with someone speaking highly of the trucking company, just a quick 15, 20-second video. They can get a following.
Right.
But anyway, I think that is a big piece that is not taken advantage of enough.
Okay. This is the final question, and I want the audience, everyone to tell me what they think too, and I'll read it off. Although it's weird reading it off, I just realized, because they can all see it the whole time.
We
So
can't.
what we need to do is just get like a
Screen?
screen to where we can see it scrolling. We'll get that. We'll get better next time. Don't worry. But I do want to hear from the audience, and I'll probably still read it off like a weirdo. Of what's changed from 10 years ago to now, what do you think is the most important update or the most important thing that should have changed in your recruiting, if that makes sense? Like if you took one thing from today of like, this is how drivers have changed, and if you haven't made this adoption, then your recruiting is definitely suffering. What would you go with?
I need a second.
I do too. That's a good question.
Let everybody think.
Yeah.
Let's see what the chat has to say.
These are not planned, by the way. Maybe they should be, but they are not scripted.
Trying to give you the authentic Randall Riley.
What was the question again? What has changed the most from 14 to 26?
Well, not only what's changed the most, but like, what is the most important thing for you as a fleet to have changed to adopt to the newer driver?
Okay.
Or the way that the market has changed? I'll give you an answer so far. Adam Sanders says pace of process, act quickly or get left behind for another company, and somebody hearted it.
I mean, that's way up there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to figure out what's the most or the biggest.
I feel like kind of what we touched on about drivers care about more than just pay. And so the companies that are still so fixated on pay and only advertising their pay, only talking about their pay, and aren't willing to look at what other benefits are going to make a difference to a driver, and aren't willing to emphasize those benefits.
Yeah.
That is a big one.
I agree with you, and the chat does too, because I think it's become, if you look, almost every single thing pointed towards the idea of work-life balance, which is what Jason says. He says, number one, COVID changed the desire for work-life balance.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you see, like even at the way home time is, the way that pay is shifted over time, technology, job search, it seems to indicate that work-life balance is more important to them than top pay. And so, I mean, obviously there's always like pay always will matter. And there's always that friction balance, but I would agree with Mackenzie and Jason here. Chris Shaver says personal phone calls. Amanda says pace is super important, being able to adapt to the market and types of drivers coming into your process. Tommy says, as a recruiter, communication, building a relationship with your driver, they should know your name. And then Amanda says adaptability, how you explain things, what's important to each driver, hiring for fit from the start. So Aaron, we're all waiting on, have you come up with yours?
I mean, I think work-life balance is it. And the way I would mention it is we went to Disney a couple of years ago. The lady who picked us up from the airport was driving an SUV. We just got to talk. And I always ask, how long you been doing Uber? What do you like? Just kind of fascinated by it. Her and her husband both quit their jobs and they both had Suburbans, I think, and bought Suburbans and both Ubered full time. She said they were each making about $75,000 a year and they could pick their shifts. So to me, when you say, hey, I'm going to make 85,000, maybe even 90,000, whatever, and I've got to be out a week, 10 days at a time, or I can be an Uber driver and choose my shifts and make 75. And so she's like, sometimes we'll get in an argument and I'll just go out and flip the Uber on and go drive for a couple hours and make some money. But anyway, I think that's the work-life balance. Like, it's tough to compete if you're asking somebody to be out 3 weeks at a time. That's what I've seen the most change And I think the fleets, not saying it's easy, have not adapted as quickly as they need to that.
Right. Well, we asked the audience, how did you like this style of digging deeper so far, but only 4 votes. Everybody let me know what you think. Everyone seems to like this style better. So maybe we will keep doing it. Let's see check the chat one more time. This says ability to sell the entire portfolio seamlessly, never say no, but rather say we don't have that available, but we do have XYZ available. Great point by Adam there. I'm going to sign off here. I'm going to start my sign off, but if you have a question or want to throw something in the chat, please keep going. Let us know what you think about this style of digging deeper. So far, I think we'll plan to do it again. I liked it. But thank you everyone for joining us. Get the copy of the research. The link is on the screen. It's been there. If not, I think it'll still get sent to you here in the next few minutes. I think in the next minute, actually, I think it goes out 1:45. And then we will have another topic next week, or not next week, next month. Sorry, Josh. We'll have another topic next month. We'll join you back here live. And am I missing anything?
Happy Easter.
Yes. So the whole Q&A live portion, all of this will be on YouTube and randallriley.com tomorrow-ish, but probably. Josh never misses a deadline. And so anyway, with that, appreciate everyone for joining. We're going to sign off here. Thank you for being so participatory in the chat. Thank you to my guests, and we'll see you next time on Digging Deeper.